This is probably the most controversial episode that I've ever done. Welcome back to the Secure Husband Podcast. Bruce Abbott, certified professional coach, founder of SecureHusband.com. One of the comments that I get a lot from men when I have the free 30-minute consultation, and even as we get into one-on-one coaching, what draws people to this podcast is they will say, you know, Bruce, you sound like the real deal. You sound like you've lived this, you've been through this. This is not somebody just talking at me who's maybe a therapist or a psychologist or some sort of marriage. You've been there, you've been in the trenches. And that's one thing that I've always said to myself when I started this podcast is I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to be honest. I know the pain that these men go through because I went through it for so long. I know that there's light at the end of the tunnel. I know that there is something on the other side if you can just work through all of this stuff. That's what fuels me. That's what fuels me as a coach. That's what fuels me every time I sit behind this microphone and record these podcasts. I try to be a straight shooter, piggybacking off of the last episode on confidence. I am going to tell you about a very bold move that I did in my marriage. It had the opportunity to blow up in my face, or it had the opportunity to turn my marriage in a different direction. Fortunately for me, it turned it in a different direction. And I want to share that with you today. The reason this is going to be very controversial is because this is a very bold, sexually intimate act that I'm going to tell you about. My wife is probably going to roll her eyeballs when she listens to this podcast and go, oh my God, I cannot believe you told that story. But I believe this story is important in the context of a sexless marriage. It is important in the context of a dead bedroom. I'm going to talk about a very bold sexual move that I did in my marriage. I want to put a couple of disclaimers first. I am going to get an enormous amount of blowback from people that are going to say that this was probably sexual assault or some form of very negative behavior. And I do not want to diminish that by any stretch of the imagination. When I tell you this story, I tell you this story from a place of bold behavior, confident behavior, assertive behavior, maybe firm behavior, but certainly not aggressive, certainly not something that I believe would come across as being assault. People have different opinions of that. I'm going to hear about this one. But I feel it's important to share it. I really feel it's important to share it. This story that I'm going to tell you here in a moment is something that I think in some ways that you should try in your marriage. I think what's going to happen is two things. This is going to work, or if you catch blowback, this gives you an opportunity to practice staying grounded during a very, very highly triggering moment. Both of those situations are good for your growth. So notice I'm getting all the disclaimers out of the way first, because when I start telling the story, I want to be able to tell the story cohesively. Here's the other thing. This is going to require a tremendous amount of courage. Please do not make it liquid courage. As somebody who, as I got older, alcohol ruined more intimate and sexual moments in my marriage than it created and enhanced. I encourage, as I tell you this story, don't do this from a place of buzzed and drinking. Because if this works, it's going to diminish your performance, at least for a lot of older guys. You know, maybe if you're listening and you're in your 30s, you know, when I was in my 30s, alcohol didn't affect sex like it did when I got into my, especially mid 40s and then 50s, early 50s. I'm 53. Those are the disclaimers that I want to put up front right now. So let me tell you a little bit of backstory and why this is important. My wife and I, we were not in a good place. The marriage was not completely sexless, but it was in a very unhealthy spot. And one night I had decided that, and let me preface too, this is really for guys. I know it's like, just get on with the story, Bruce. No, this is for guys who right now are so gun shy because their sexless marriage, their dead bedroom has become so overwhelming and so painful, discouraging. This is for guys who are beaten down. It's also for situations where the baggage and the ruptures in the marriage have not gone too far. What do I mean by that? There's no affairs, there's no violence. This is the idea of good men married to good women, but there's dysfunction. But there is this dynamic where you now are not comfortable because of the rejection, the pain, really initiating sex anymore. I know for about 50% of the guys listening right now, that may not be your situation, but I know that there is a huge number of listeners. The situation has just gotten to the point where they don't feel comfortable initiating. The rejection is so painful. I told you about how confidence is attractive. Sometimes you have to just be bold and confident and strong. And it is amazing how those moments, we feel like it might go bad, but they actually don't. And those moments become a positive in your marriage. Okay, so here's the story. We were not in a good place. The sex was kind of in an odd place because I was, again, using alcohol to numb. One night, my wife, she got up in the middle of the night to make a bathroom trip. And I just remember telling myself, I'd heard something about being bold, being confident, that's attractive to a woman. And in this particular situation of mine, I had gotten to the point where I was just a shell. I literally was just a shell of the confident man that I was when we started dating in our 20s. We've been together now for almost 30 years, I guess. Yeah, maybe 25 years at least. So that confidence was gone because of everything that I talk about in this podcast. That's why that confidence was gone. And I just remember having this moment. I was craving my wife. We were in a place where I just felt so gun shy initiating sex because rejection. So she gets up, she goes into the bathroom, and I decided I am not going to be timid anymore. I'm not going to be gun shy anymore. I'm going to be confident. I'm going to be bold. My wife, she came out of the bathroom. She washed her hands. I walked into the bathroom wearing nothing. And in about a less than 3 to 5 second moment, I just came up to her, kissed her passionately, pushing her gently, firmly, not aggressively, and then slam her up against the door, the wall that was there. Within like 3 seconds, literally, 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, I kissed her passionately on the lips, then on her neck, and then I literally just pulled the nightgown off and panties down. One of two things could have happened at that moment, and this is what I want to prepare you for. I'm going to encourage you to do something along these lines. Now, okay, whoa, Bruce. Here's the thing. One of two things is going to happen. It's a 50-50 shot. Let's take the 50% shot that this is not going to go well. She's going to reject. She's going to push you away. She's going to say no. She's going to get angry. This is an opportunity. This is actually, again, this is not a bad thing because what you did is you exhibited courage and confidence and you acted. Remember, you take action. If she says no or pushes you away or not right now or whatever, what this does is this gives you an opportunity to stay grounded. This gives you an opportunity to show that you can not get defeated if the rejection happens. So what this does is if she says no, if she's like, get off of me or stopped or no, I'm not in the mood or anything like that. And then what you do, you kiss her on the forehead and you just say, I was just craving you, baby. And then and you don't sulk, you don't withdraw, you don't get angry. This is why it's so important not to drink in all of this, because throw alcohol in there and all of a sudden your ability to regulate is now diminished some. So I encourage you, do this completely sober. What happens is if it doesn't work out, it gives you an opportunity to show that you can take rejection and handle it. You pass it through. You breathe into it. So why is that a good thing, Bruce? Because what it does is it shows you that, again, you can take courage and act from it in a bold, confident way. And it shows that then when it doesn't work out, you don't get butthurt and that you can actually stay grounded. And the couple of guys that I've talked to about this, they've actually tried this. Of the guys that did this, I had 2 of them where it worked well and 2 of them where it didn't work well. I'm talking about the not working well right now. What happened in this, it ended up being a good thing, because even though she rejected it for the first time in a long time, he showed a backbone. And actually one of the guys, if I remember correctly, they ended up actually having sex that next night, because she had processed that and everything. She saw it didn't faze him, and that was attractive. I don't remember what happened with the other guy. I think it was, not a good thing. Okay, so that's the negative part of all of this. Let me tell you about my story, and let me tell you about what happens if it's not a negative. That was some of the hottest sex my wife and I had in years. It was a pivotal moment in the healing of my marriage. It created a palpable shift, because all of a sudden what it did was it showed, again, courage, bold, a backbone. What I'm telling you is, and again, this is the controversial part, I want you to try something like that. Now, again, this is not going to work for everyone. I honestly believe 50% of the guys listening, this is going to be a shift in your marriage, a real shift. Yes, the other 50%, because the night may not go like you want, there's going to be resistance, there's going to be pushback, but either way, it creates, not only does it create clarity, because sometimes, remember, clarity is what we need to see where this relationship is going, but more importantly, shows that you are gaining confidence, that you are gaining internal emotional strength, and that you can regulate in the pushback. Because if you are in a place like mine where the marriage wasn't completely dead, but it was struggling, that act of boldness was welcomed. That act of boldness and confidence was sexy and attractive. Because we were off emotionally, but the old version of me before that moment would try to read the situation, try to time things perfectly, try not to mess it up, try not to get rejected. And from there came hesitation, came uncertainty, this timid energy. And that's not polarizing. It's not attractive. It's not confident and engaging. It's playing it safe because we've been hurt so much. But I just remember getting to a point where it's like, if I just keep doing what I'm doing, nothing's going to change. Or what I've been working isn't working. So I just made that decision that night that I'm going to show up differently. I'm not going to show up as desperate or needy or asking for permission. That the point that I'm really getting in here, and I don't want to say the whole, beg for forgiveness versus asking for permission, but really this is what it's about. We tend to, in sexless marriages and dead bedrooms, we're trying to get permission. Sometimes you just got to try and just got to be bold and give it a shot and see what happens. When I did that, I felt so confident in that moment that it literally oozed from me. Was I scared? Yeah. Was there a high risk of rejection? 50%. When I tell you this, because the context matters, this was not forced. This was not aggressive. I tell the guys that I tell in the coaching, whenever I've told this story, I'm like, think 50 Shades of Grey. Think that kind of thought. But it was assertive in a very compassionate, loving way. When I made that bold move, it was filled with love, compassion, passion. It was not violent. It was not aggressive. I want the context to be seen in all of this, but it was very present. And it was hot. It was hot. And I saw my wife in a way, and behaviors that night that I had not seen in a long time. And I built upon that. And that's why I say this was a pivotal moment in my marriage, because it was that point I had been doing a lot of this work. I was feeling so much more confident. I was feeling more secure. And I was starting to realize that I was playing the victim. And I was also starting to understand this idea of I'm the only one responsible for getting my wants and needs met. And again, not forcefully, but I needed to be assertive. 50-50 shot. And you have to kind of read your situation a little bit. What I would say is if you guys are in an okay place in every other area except for the bedroom, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you will probably have success with this. That's kind of where I was at. If you've got a lot of other areas outside the bedroom where you guys have problems, maybe this won't go so well. But that's still, again, it's okay. As long as you do this from a place of confidence, firm and assertive in a loving, compassionate way, not aggressive and violent. Now you see why this could be controversial. A lot of my podcasts I will take and make little short videos and stuff from this. I may not do it with this one because I can see this one being pulled completely out of context on TikTok or YouTube Shorts or anything like that. So I will keep this solely in its long form here. The point of this episode is, again, piggybacking off of the last episode of confidence. Stop being the victim and start being bold. No asking for permission, no hinting at it, no passive aggressive, just direct, confident. I think I said something like, I want you right now. And I cannot wait. I think I said something along those lines. And that was really all I said. And I let the actions speak for themselves. Now, I know that there's some guys listening to this going, I try initiating sex and I just get shut down. Okay, well, how did you initiate it? Were you hesitant? Were you seeking approval? That's what happens in these dead bedroom type situations. We are so gun shy. We're making the move and bracing for rejection all at the same time. This is literally like jump off the diving board into the deep end. This is standing on the edge of the airplane with the parachute on and jump. That's the kind of confidence and boldness that this action has to have. Think about how you might have been initiating sex lately. Okay, she lays this way, I rub this, we do this, I rub that, she doesn't give me any feedback at all, I touch that, I touch this, I rub this, I say these words, she lays there like a starfish, and then we're done. But when you come across bold, like the story that I am telling you, that's a whole different feel. And in that moment, I wasn't hesitant. I wasn't looking for approval. Rejection was not in my mind at that moment. I brought a completely different energy in that very moment. And my wife's response was very different. I came there with confidence, presence, energy. That boldness was there. For half of you, this is going to probably be maybe some of the hottest sex that you guys have had in a while. For the other half of you, if it does not go well, it's okay. And if you tell yourself that, now go in with the idea of rejection is not an option. Failure is not an option. Go in there with that. And if it happens, just tell yourself, I'm going to stay grounded in all this. And you go in there and it's like, I'm going to show myself that I can be triggered and I can still stay present and grounded. Now, it may hurt, yes, but if you breathe through that trigger, pass it through, let it go, don't react from it, you are still making great progress. Because what happens now is, what did you used to do in rejection? You sulked, you withdrew. Maybe you got up and went and slept on the couch. You went to another room. You didn't speak to her. Think about these things that we usually do. I was a shut down, go quiet guy. That was my MO. Just think about this. Think about that. If your dynamic has become so predictable and rejection filled and everything, just try this. Your details of how you pull it off may not be exactly the same as mine, but I just knew that in the middle of the night, all the kids were asleep and she was awake, I was awake. Go for it. You got to make the judgment call here. How much deep resentment and emotional disconnection and unresolved conflict do you have in your marriage? Because if you've got all of that stuff outside the bedroom, okay, yeah, you might get the pushback, but that's okay. That's okay. Be bold. But if everything seems to be okay, it's just you guys are in such a low sex, dead bedroom moment, maybe give this a shot, because you may be in the 50% that were like me, where it broke a pattern and created a shift. It's just about energy. Like, I didn't fake that confidence. I didn't fake that presence. I just felt it inside. I felt the energy, felt that I'm going to do this. I'm not going to be aggressive and disrespectful and pushy, but I'm going to be confident, present right there, unafraid of the outcome independent. That's the difference. And if you get blowback, you get blowback. You're not preparing for rejection, it's just you're preparing for how you respond to rejection. So if you can stay grounded, stay calm, not spiral when that happens, you're actually, again, making progress in your marriage because you are now showing that you can emotionally regulate. You can internally lead yourself. And that was huge. I mean, that was a huge moment. That's why I can remember every detail about it. Not because of what just happened that night and my wife and I, but it was how I started to feel inside about who I wanted to become. I was tired of being a victim, and I was the one doing it to myself. I couldn't play it safe anymore. I had to take ownership of that and just make a bold move. Am I suggesting you do this? I'm suggesting you try it. Yeah, I am. I'm suggesting that trying to keep the peace and playing it safe, if you're in a sexless marriage in a dead bedroom, if you're looking for something to change the dynamic, it's not going to change on its own. So playing it safe, it's probably gotten you where you are right now. Being bold might be what creates the shift. It might be the catalyst. Again, I'm not saying be aggressive or reckless, I'm just saying be confident and willing to accept whatever happens. Try being bold. Try that this weekend. If you're sitting there thinking, I don't know if I can do that, I'm not trying to force you to do anything, just like you're not trying to force your wife to do anything, but I am trying to get you to understand what's possible when you just take some chances. Like I said, this is probably one of the most controversial episodes. I don't know what kind of feedback I'm going to get from this. It's either going to be really good or I am going to deal with some serious blowback. But either way, I got to be honest. I got to share with you guys my journey. And this was an important part of my journey out of a dead bedroom. I hope that you take this information that I tell you today the way that I'm intending it for it to be received. And I hope that it's not going to be misunderstood. I have a lot of female listeners that listen to my work, and I hope that they understand that this was not about forcing myself on my wife or any sort of assault. It was bringing passion, confidence, and boldness in a moment. That's what I hope that listeners will take from this. That's my goal, just so there's no misunderstanding. To be able to show men that many of our wives in a sexless marriage and a dead bedroom really do crave their husbands still. They really do love their husbands. They really are still attracted to their husbands. It's that the confidence, the lack of confidence, the insecurities, and the behaviors that spew from all of that, which is the whole reason I started this podcast and coaching business, is to overcome all of that. So I hope that this podcast is received in the manner that I intend it to be received and not misunderstood. I hope that this story strikes a nerve and helps you out. If you're catching this podcast for the very first time, if this is the first Secure Husband podcast that you are listening to, boy, did you pick a doozy to start. Hit that subscribe button. I encourage you, go back and listen to some of the other ones. I cover a lot of sexless marriage, nervous system regulation, boundaries. I cover a lot of these things that keep men stuck in marriage. If this is your first time listening to a Secure Husband podcast, hit that subscribe button. If you are a regular listener, I'm telling you right now, there are men that find this every day that are saying, oh my gosh, where has this podcast been? If you're a regular listener, and there are a lot of you because I see the analytics, would you go to Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen, and give this podcast a review? If you're a regular listener, there's something about this podcast that keeps bringing you back. Would you share that in a review? That helps the algorithms share this with more men who are struggling and in pain. If you're just stuck and need somebody to help guide you, where do I go? What do I do? How do I handle this situation? What do I do with this, with my wife here? And go to securehusband.com. Fill out that contact form, sets up a free 30-minute consultation. It's just a conversation you and I have about where you're at, what's going on in your relationship, and I tell you a little bit about the coaching. That's it. No sales pitch, no pressure. I just encourage you, fill out that form, and let's see if one-on-one coaching might be helpful for you. That's a doozy. That was quite a podcast. But I hope you're enjoying this entire month-long series on the sexless marriage and the dead bedroom. And I'll see you on the next Secure Husband podcast. Thanks for listening.